Hello again, lovely piano learners. I hope you're all really well. Now today I want to talk to you about semi-objective feedback, which is my kind of fancy pants name for videoing yourself when you're practicing the piano, so that you can watch the footage back later and spot problems and opportunities that you might not have spotted when you were kind of deep in the thick of practice, and your concentration was maybe elsewhere. Now, semi-objective feedback is going to be useful for you whatever kind of level you're at, okay? But it's going to be particularly useful for you in a couple of situations. First of all, if you're self-teaching, and you're not getting regular feedback from a teacher. And also if you are in the early days of learning how to play the piano, we all know what it's like in the first few months. It is super hard work. You are spending kind of all of your mental energy just kind of trying to get your fingers and your hands to do what you're telling them to do, okay? And because of that, it's really easy to lose focus on the little details of what you're playing, so you can make mistakes and not notice that you're making them. But then if you watch it back afterwards, if you generate some semi-objective feedback, that is how you can identify those mistakes and fix them quickly and accurately. I call it semi-objective. Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious, really. It's not true objective feedback from another person, but it's kind of putting a distance between yourself and your own playing. So, you can do the practice, but then look at it afterwards and study what you've done with kind of a more objective view. Let's start off by talking very briefly about how you're going to capture this footage. I don't want to spend ages on this because there are lots of resources out there, and I'll talk about some of them in just a second. The ideal, though, is that you're going to get a good, clear overhead shot of the piano keyboard like this, okay? So you can clearly see what your hands are doing on the keys. You can also take footage from the side, which has the benefit usually of being easier, but the trade-off there is that usually it's not as useful, okay? But it can be useful sometimes. I'll talk more about that in a second. The ideal, though, is that we have a good, clear overhead shot, and that means you need some means of hanging your phone or other camera over your piano. Now, the way I'm doing it is pretty complicated. I'm using a photographer's frame because I have various things to hang off it as well as my camera. I've got a microphone to hang off and various other bits and pieces. But you don't need anything as complicated as that. What I would suggest you try is kind of the classic way of doing it, the way I used to use actually, and that's just to use an old boom mic stand, and you can pick them up really, really cheaply. What I used to do is just have my boom mic stand, and I would attach my phone to the top of it using a sock and an elastic band. If you want to be a little bit more elaborate and maybe a little bit more secure, you can also buy one of the kind of super cheap camera phone clamps that you can screw into the top of a mic stand. I've got a whole tutorial on how I used to do that I shot some years ago, and I will include a link to that in the description text down below. I'll also include a link to a couple of other people's tutorials because there are various ways of doing it, okay, and it's really a question of finding the way that suits you. Now, like I said, the other thing you can do is take footage from the side, and that can work. Its great benefit is that it tends to be much easier. So you can literally, and I do this sometimes, you can literally sort of pick up your phone and stick it on one edge of your piano and kind of at least get some sort of view of what you're doing. You can't see as much. It's better if you can prop it up a little bit and angle it down somehow, stick it on a pile of books or whatever. But it's quick and easy and it's better than nothing. So maybe just try that to start with actually and see how you get on. Okay, so let's start off thinking about the kind of things that you can be looking for. Now, the number one problem that beginners tend to have that can be picked up by this sort of method, the semi-objective feedback method, is hand and finger position. Beginners very often tend to play kind of on the edge of the keyboard. So, they're kind of touching the edges of the notes. If you look at more experienced players and professional players, you'll see that they tend to have much more flexibility. They're not worried too much about shoving their fingers quite deep into the keys. So if I'm playing a chord like that, like C, in that position, look how far up the key I am with that G there. I've got my finger all the way up there. So the first thing you can look out for if you're a relative beginner is your position. You want to find yourself in a situation where you are not necessarily buried deep in the keys all the time, but where you are flexible. Because if you're playing on the edge of the keys all the time, that means if you suddenly have to go for a black note, it's a bit of a stretch, okay, and that could result in a bit of an inelegant sound, or you might make a mistake or something like that. So you want to be in a kind of position where you can fluently and easily get quite deep into the keys if you want to, but also play on the edges if you want to. Okay, so when you're a beginner, you're not yet going to develop that skill to move up and down. That kind of comes instinctively. But if you notice yourself playing on the edge a lot, and again, it's not something you tend to notice when you're in the thick of practice, but if you seem to be right here out on the edge of the keyboard, then that is something that you can correct. Just try digging in a little bit deeper, and you'll find, especially when you start playing things with a lot of black notes, it makes your life much easier and you're playing much more fluent. Now, I'm a terrible example of good hand position because I have, regular viewers on my channel will know, I have weird bone structures in my lower arms. I have this thing called radioulnar synostosis, whereby I've got kind of fused wrists, so I have to kind of lift my elbow up quite unnaturally high relative to most people, you so-called normal people. And so I hold my hand in what for most people is quite an unnatural position on the piano. But broadly, what beginners tend to do is play a little bit too flat. Okay, certainly you don't want your wrist lower than your fingers, you want your wrist higher than your fingers, and you want to be kind of dropping onto the keys. And again, that kind of gives you much more control. In the early days, it's not a problem. Okay, because you're playing very simple stuff. But once things begin to get more complicated, you'll find that having that slightly higher wrist, that having gravity on your side a little bit more, and that relaxed forearm will really help you to get around the keyboard. If you are not sure you are doing it correctly, then the way to do it, semi-objective feedback wise, is to take some footage of yourself and compare it to professional piano players. Okay, moving on to something that kind of applies to people at every level. Let's imagine that you're working on some written music, okay? And this could be like literally a beginner's piece, or it could be, a list study or something. It doesn't matter how simple or how advanced it happens to be. A really common problem actually is simply misreading, okay? So if your piece has a chord of E flat in it, let's say it has, that chord in, and that's written in the bass clef, so that G will be on a high ledger line. It's really easy to actually misread that and think it's an E or a B flat instead, and it will still sound okay, because it's still in the chord, okay, and you won't notice. But when you watch it back, you stand a better chance of noticing. So little things like that, this technique is wonderful for picking up problems like that. Let me give you an example. I'm going to put myself through a little bit of mild hell now with a piece of sheet music. Now, here's a piece that I wrote a couple of years ago called the Lullaby March, and I wrote it for a tutorial called How to Make a Piano Do an Orchestra's Job, which was a tutorial that I was really, really proud of and not many people watched. Okay, so I'll put a link to it down below, and once this video has ended, do go and watch that video and give it a bit of love, because I was really pleased with it. I thought it taught a lot of useful kind of theory skills. Anyway, that's by the by. I wrote this piece for it, and I got it to a reasonable standard so I could perform it. Here is me playing it in the original tutorial. Yeah, so just to prove that I can actually play it. But it's been a couple of years since I've even looked at it. All I've done today is literally just print it off, tape it together, as you can see with my my lovely brown tape, and I'm going to have a go at playing it kind of sight unseen, and it will probably be a bit rough. Okay, I'm not going to play through the whole thing. I will just play the first section and into the kind of middle sectiony bit and see how I do. Compared to that performance from a couple of years ago, which you can see in full in that other tutorial, by the way, this is going to sound pretty shonky. Let me just video it, myself playing it for a few seconds, and then we'll look through the video and discuss some of the areas that I can identify that I can improve. Okay, cross your fingers for me. Here we go. Okay, so here we are back at the top of that performance. As you could hear, I didn't play it half as confidently as I did a couple of years ago. I didn't do too badly to start with, but then things came a bit unstuck in the B section, as we will see. Okay, just let me set the recording going and let's see what we can spot. Okay, reasonably confident to start with. Something I pick up straight away, even though that first section is actually pretty confident, these left-hand chords are not quite as on the ball as they were when I was playing it a couple of years ago, looking at that old recording. Okay, so they are a little bit less confident, not quite as precise. It's quite hard to spot, but that, that has me making a mental note that if I were going to practice again, I would focus on getting those on the nail. Just listen to them again. Yeah, just there, just not ideal. Just want to have another go at those. But overall, not too bad. Things start to go really wrong here. In fact, I grind to a halt. And that's because we have one or two awkward things happen at the same time. So we finish the main A section melody on our third finger on the F there. Then we have this bit of melody, dee dee. I'm not going to sing it, bum 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 bum. So I've got to get my second finger on the F and then put my thumb under to the G there. And then just slightly after that, get that left-hand chord down, which comes in half a beat after that note. You can see we've got the quaver rest there, the eighth note rest, and then that chord. Let's just listen to me try that. Yeah, and that's where it kind of melts. Okay, so that tells me that, and this is often the case when you're practicing, the joins between sections are often tricky. Okay, so I want to go back and really look at that. Something else I'm noticing is that I wasn't making enough of the dynamics. Okay, so if you look at the start of the score, P, piano, soft, definitely wasn't P, and then I'm, kind of not getting really anywhere near this, this crescendo. Often what happens when you're thinking hard, when you're sight reading, whatever, it becomes hard to get the dynamics right. They tend to go out of the window, and hardest of all are soft dynamics. Yeah, when your brain is stretched, you tend to bash. So again, mental note, need to practice those dynamics. And let's keep going. Okay, come on Hilton, try harder. There we go. And finally he gets it. Yeah, because there's another little awkwardness there. We go down that bass line, and I've solved that problem of running out of fingers by putting my fourth over there, which is not a completely unreasonable thing to do. But it does mean there's a little bit of a jump up there, which I need to practice. Okay, as you can hear, there's some bits I'm more confident at. So what I'm doing as I'm looking at this back is noticing the bits, and maybe I'd be sat here with my score marking these bits in, that I really need to focus on. I really need to attack the problem, to use terminology that I've often used in the past. These are things that I could all notice when I was practicing, but I might not notice them as clearly. I might forget them. Again, going down this semi-objective feedback route allows me to look at my playing more objectively and really isolate problems. Let's keep going. Here I am. Again, I want to make more of this crescendo. And again, I should have gone P there. Okay, so it's crescendo, 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 dun, 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 and nice and soft again. It's called Lullaby March for a reason. You've got to play the whole thing quietly. So this left hand here, I know I need to work on. The right hand isn't such a big deal. The right hand's quite straightforward, but there's a lot of complicated stuff here. Multiple voices happening in each hand. I've got the fingering more or less right there. There's a little bit of awkward fingering there to get the slur right on those dyads, those pairs of notes. But overall, not quite an interesting exercise, yeah. So there's quite a lot of things that I need to remember here. I want to make that B section cantabile. I want to give it a singing effect, and mostly what's leading me to come unstuck is the left hand. Yeah, I remember this actually from when I first practiced it a couple of years ago, but the left hand is a problem here. So what I might do after watching this back is decide that, okay, a good strategy now might be to practice that left hand in isolation and just build my confidence with it. But as you can see, we've managed to pick out quite a few things that, yes, we might have seen when we were practicing. But like I said, this allows us to look at it more objectively, maybe make a list, mark up our score, all of those things that are going to help us address the problems of practicing this more efficiently. If you're finding this useful, by the way, there's a whole chapter on feedback in my latest book, How to Be a Better Musician. So a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about now comes out of the research and thinking that I did when I was writing that chapter of the book. So do check out the book. It's got loads and loads of exercises and fun stuff to do and lots of kind of interesting angles on musicianship. You can find out more about it at bettermusicianbook.com. That's bettermusicianbook.com. Okay, so let's just think about a couple of other ways you can use semi-objective feedback. To start with, how about if you are improvising? Let me just improvise through a little bit on the rhythm changes in B flat, famous jazz chord progression. I'll just noodle around a bit. I won't try to be particularly perfect, but then let's talk about some of the things that I could have picked up there. Okay, so here we are back at the start of that little performance. As you could see, it was quite a lot more fluent and confident than when I was playing the Lullaby March. But we're also doing a different type of thing here. Clearly, we're improvising rather than playing from score. So we're going to be picking up, probably this time around, on slightly more subtle things. By the way, I'm not going to be digging too much now into the theory of what I was doing here. If you're interested in the rhythm changes and jazz improvisation in general, I've got loads of tutorials on the subject. I actually made a tutorial on improvising the rhythm changes a few weeks ago. I think it was back in August 2023. So I'll add a link to that in the description text down below. Okay, so like I said, we're looking for slightly more subtle things here. Let's just listen to the first few seconds. Here we go. Okay, nothing super obvious going wrong there, a little bit of a splashy note in the right hand here, but listening to it, I want to try listening again and counting the beat. Yeah, you'll see why. Let me try playing it and I'll count the beat. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Can you see? It's not on the beat, okay? I'm speeding up, I'm slowing down. I dropped a couple of half beats in a couple of places. And again, this is the sort of thing that you can spot when you are using this kind of semi-objective feedback technique. It's quite difficult to notice that you are off the beat or speeding up or slowing down when you are just soloing like this. I hoped I hope that would happen actually, and I kind of deliberately switched off a bit when I was playing in the hope that it would, because it's a really good example of the kind of thing, once again, you can spot. Now, is that a problem or isn't it a problem? If this was purely a solo piano performance, it wouldn't be a problem. If I was sat in a lounge bar somewhere or providing background music at someone's wedding, absolutely no problem at all if I'm varying the beat a bit. Indeed, in a lot of music where you want deliberate rubato, I would have to do it. However, you don't want to get in the habit of always practicing in that kind of sloppy way, not altogether obeying the timing, because then one day when you have to play with a band or a singer or whatever, suddenly it's really difficult. So what that's telling me there is that, yes, if I want to play this with a bass player or a drummer or a singer or whatever, then I need to do some metronome practice. Okay, if it's just going to be a solo, not such a big deal, but if I'm practicing it for something, for some sort of ensemble event, then I need to think about that timing. Okay, let's carry on. Okay, so I'm finding the right hand improv there kind of a little bit uninspiring. So maybe I'm making a mental note to maybe develop a few more right hand kind of licks here. What I'm doing here is using stuff, especially that kind of pattern that I played just there. You know, I probably learned that when I was 13 years old or something, and I tend to fall into using that kind of pattern just when I'm getting lazy and I'm not wanting to work as hard mentally. Okay, so yeah, I want to freshen that up a bit. Left hand is getting a bit samey, a bit repetitive. I'm using a lot of rhythmic anticipation in the left hand and rhythmic delay actually, so pulling the timing on the chords about, which is actually why I would have been, losing the time against the beat. When you're using a lot of anticipation and delay, it makes it really easy to skip half beats or to speed up or slow down. So I maybe want to think about varying that, maybe use some anticipation and delay, but also sometimes play it with a very strict 2 beats per chord. So yeah, I want to kind of, what it's telling me is that I want to freshen this up a bit. Let's keep going. Okay, not too bad. A little bit fluffy. So that run I played up there, yeah, being a bit splashy, making a few mistakes when you're improvising isn't a problem, but it's nice to be precise. And this little run is a bit of a set piece. And if you look carefully, you'll see there was a bit of sort of fluffy, mashy stuff going on around the G, A flat, A. Let me just play it again. And again. Yeah, I was just kind of squelching over there. So again, that tells me I want to go back and practice just a few times through that kind of little run, yeah, which would sound a lot neater and cleaner if it was tidier around there. Okay, so once again, quite a few interesting things that I've picked up that I wouldn't necessarily have picked up, at least not as easily, if I had simply been relying on my own ears as I played. Finally, a really important way in which you can use semi-objective feedback is to ask yourself about the overall musicality of your playing. This is where introducing a gap really makes a big difference. Okay, semi-objective feedback, sometimes you can use it straight away. Okay, sometimes you can if you want to play, if your hand position is all right, you can literally video yourself and then watch it back and you have an answer. But sometimes it's a good idea to leave a gap. Yeah, and especially when it comes to musicality type stuff, video yourself, then come back a week later or 2 weeks later and watch it again. And it can be a real eye-opener. First of all, it can be great for your morale because you can be like, hey, actually that sounds really good. When you play it, you think, oh, it's awful. This happens to me time and time again. But then when you watch it back a couple of weeks later, you're more objective. And you say, yeah, actually, that sounds pretty good. But that's also when you can pick up on the musicality side of things, when you can say, yeah, maybe I can just work on the expression a bit more there. Maybe we need, a bit of a crescendo there. Maybe I need to phrase that section better. Okay, so leaving the gap and thinking about the musicality can really, really help you. Okay, so if you want something to do right now before you go and have a go at generating some semi-objective feedback for yourself, like I said, go and have a look at that Making a Piano Do an Orchestra's Job video, because I was super proud of it and I think it needs more views. I think you'll find it really interesting, and it's only like 11 minutes long or something. Yeah, so go and check that out right now and let me know how you get on with the semi-objective feedback, and I will see you next time.